Welcome to the OncoPT podcast, where you'll learn from oncology experts, practitioners, and patients to help you on your journey to become a confident and competent OncoPT. Here's your host, Elise Cantu.
Hey OncoPTs, and welcome back to this episode of the OncoPT podcast. If you are listening to this episode in real time, that means that we are just a few days away from finding out the results of the 2024 ABPTS Oncology Specialty Certification Exam. Now, I'm actually going to go off script right now. I have my notes in front of me here, but this is something that's really important that is not talked about enough. So before we get into the meat and potatoes of this episode, hear me out. If you are one of those OncoPTs who is waiting for your exam results, like you took the exam in February or March, you're waiting on your results right now, I need you to understand. I have seen that they are going to post the results. ABPTS has said they are going to post the results by June 30th. ABPTS, I love you. I love you, okay? But I also know that you don't always do things by the deadline that you say you're going to. So, dear friend, I would not be surprised, you listening to the podcast right now, I would not be surprised if you get your results on June 30th. Because that's actually what happened to me the year that I took my own exam. They said, okay, we're going to have them this date. And then we literally got them the next day. So just be aware. I wouldn't be surprised if you technically get your results on June 30th, or maybe even June 31st. Yes, I know that's not a real day, but work with me here. The likelihood that you might get your results later than what they say is entirely possible. And that is based on the history over the past 3 years, actually more than that now, gosh. Over the past few years that I've been working with people to achieve their specialty certification, to submit their case reports, etc. The deadline is not always deadlining. Now, for you have to always submit your stuff by the deadline, period. End of story. Like, no negotiation whatsoever. But know that ABPTS is sometimes kind of late. Okay, they're sometimes kind of late. And I just wanted to put this disclaimer on the top of the episode. So if you have not yet received your results, it is now June 30th. It might come on June 30th. The website says results to be released by June 30th. I wouldn't be surprised if it's on June 30th. So anyways, now that we've got that out of the way, let's get into what we're really talking about today. Now, it can be so easy as you are waiting on your exam results. Whether you're listening to this today, which is, end of June 2024, or maybe in the future, it is so easy to hinge your future, what you envision for your future as an OncoPT, on these exam results, right? Oh, once I get my results back, once I pass the exam, I'm going to do XYZ, blah, blah, blah. Right? And we build this up so much in our minds. And understandably so, right? You have spent the better part of a year just on the process itself, right? From doing your application to writing your case report to getting your case report back. Maybe you had to do corrections, maybe you didn't. And then studying for the exam, preparing for all of those case-based questions, and then finally taking the exam and now waiting. It's been a year, not to mention all the time that you have put into this process leading up to that year, right? How many years have you been practicing? How many years have you been working with oncology patients? How many years have you been, learning alongside your colleagues, and then late at night when you're at home by yourself trying to catch up on articles? How much time and effort have you put into this process? I would wager a long time. Because you, my friend, are an amazing OncoPT, and you put in that effort not for yourself, but for your patients. But even so, with all the hustle and bustle and the excitement of the exam, and now the results coming out in a few days, it's really easy to have so much writing on this exam. And for some of us even to base our value and our worth as an OncoPT, as a person, on this exam and how you did on this exam. But your worth has absolutely nothing to do with this exam. Your value as an OncoPT isn't tied to a single certification or a continuing education course that you take, or exam, or even promotion at your job. It's in the countless hours that we just talked about that you have spent with your patients. It's the compassion that you show every day and in your continuous efforts to learn and improve to make the world a better place for your patients. Every single time you walk through the doors of your clinic, of your hospital, of whatever facility that you're in, you are making the conscious effort to show up better for your patients. And that is where your worth and your value lie. So this is to say that this journey that you're on, this journey that you've been on, and the journey that you're going to continue being on, because wake up call, or, spoiler alert, if you haven't figured it out, there's going to be life after this exam. Again, that's whether you pass, whether you don't pass. There is still going to be life after this exam. Maybe it looks different, but maybe it doesn't actually look that different. But I would guarantee you that there's some small changes on the other side of this experience, again, regardless of your exam results, that you're going to look back on and say, whoa, now I get it. Now I understand what was going on. Now I understand why things happened the way that they happened. But it's often really hard to understand that in the meantime. And I'm going to be perfectly honest, I have not understood that so clearly until this past week. So if you listened to last week's episode of the podcast, amazing. If not, definitely go back and do that. It was a super fun episode that I recorded after coincidentally meeting one of y'all, the listener, at a wedding that I went to. It was actually my cousin's wedding. It was super fun. But anyways, since then, I've done quite a bit of just reflecting, and there have been other things that have happened and other people that I've talked to kind of in my friend group, in my colleague group, etc., that have really put some perspective on some events that have happened over the last year. And one in particular, so long story short, again, I covered a little more of this in the podcast episode last week, but I'm going to do the TLDR right now, is that last fall, kind of last summer into last fall, I was working with an organization here in Fort Worth, and I was going to actually move in to that facility where I would be able to treat oncology patients all day, every day. And this is absolutely like my dream. This is what I've wanted to do for a long time. After I left my corporate position, I was like, I would love nothing more than to be able to serve in this capacity that I envisioned for myself and what we had, talked about with this other organization. So many months went by, we were negotiating back and forth, and it unfortunately came down to payment, which sucks that that's what it came down to, but sometimes this is the case. And there were a couple other clauses that we couldn't get down, like an agreement on, and so I ultimately walked away from this. I walked away from, again, what I thought was my dream, what I thought I had been working towards, what I had been working towards for the past few years, because I just knew this was not the right move for me. Like, as badly as I wanted to muscle my way through it and make it work and make it be the thing that I wanted it to be and that I knew it could be, I knew it was not actually going to be that way. And I was devastated. I really was devastated after all was said and done, and it didn't come to fruition. And it was like, dang. Dang is not the word I used, as I'm sure you can imagine, but just the feeling of, I have failed. I thought this is what I wanted. This is what I've been working towards for so long. It did not happen. And I'm kind of lost. And I don't know what to do at this point. Now, that was back kind of December time period, okay? So fast forward, today it's the end of June. And the things that have happened since that deal fell through have blown my mind. And it wasn't like I woke up one day and was like, oh, everything's better, everything's taken care of, all good to go, no big deal, whatever. It was extremely gradual. Most days I didn't even notice that I was feeling better about the decision I had made to walk away, or that, wow, things are actually working out, despite the fact that I wanted this to happen and it didn't happen. it was a series of very gradual things that I really couldn't even notice myself. It was more that others around me, whether that was my husband, whether that was friends, whether that was colleagues and, other medical professionals I work with here in the DFW area, even people outside of this, right? Friends across the country who are in this therapy world were the ones who were really noticing these things when we would talk about this stuff and say, wow, look at that. Things are actually changing here. And it really wasn't until the kind of sprinkles on the cake, or the icing on the cake with the cherry on top, was really this past week when, as it does, time goes on, you find out more information to really say, wow, that was really a good decision. It was a really hard decision in the time period. It was really, it sucked. It sucked in the meantime when all was happening, that I was like, I wish this would have worked out. And I had this perfect vision in my head of how things were going to work out. And when they didn't, they kind of fell apart in my brain. And it's taken me, almost 6 months to kind of be at a point where I can say, okay, that didn't happen. I'm bummed. I'm disappointed it didn't happen. But it worked out for me in the end how it was supposed to. And the things that I'm now able to do, because I have taken my private practice and I've moved it into an office suite. One of the things, and this is something I don't think I've ever shared on the podcast before, but when I was young, like middle school, high school, I had this vision of like, I'm going to be this, it sounds so funny to say out loud, but hear me out. I had this vision for myself, this dream of like, I cannot wait to be a sophisticated adult. I know, so goofy, right? This sophisticated adult living in the big city and like working in downtown. And I just had this vision. It was probably from like chick flicks and whatnot that I watched at that time period. And it was at that moment, like it was this spring when I was going into my office one morning where I was going to see a patient. And I realized I'm driving into downtown Fort Worth, where I have an office suite that we are renting. And I'm going into the office in downtown in a big city where I'm doing the work that I love. And that was like a moment for me of, oh my God, I'm living a dream that I had as a child and kind of lost sight of. Anyways, I'm so excited about this. I'm really excited about this kind of realization and the revelation that some of my amazing therapy friends have really like brought to my mind over the past week and beyond, and even before then. To where I can now sit here and reflect back on that experience back in December and say, that sucked. I wish it would have worked out, but I'm kind of glad it worked out the way that it did. And the reason I tell this story, I know, bringing it back on the railroad tracks here. It is really hard when things don't go your way, when things don't go how you think they should go, how you want them to go. But I really do believe that things happen for a reason. And sometimes we don't know what that reason is right away. Sometimes it takes 6 months plus to a year from now, even longer, before you can really kind of conceptualize this ultimately happened for my higher self, for my better self. There's a great, I think either Queen Herbie or Allie Reeves. There's some podcasters that I listen to. They talk about, if not for me, then for my betterment. They say it much more eloquently. But if something is not going to go my way, I hope it is for the betterment of me, so that I can become the best version of myself that I'm working towards. If what I want is not going to serve me, then whatever happens, I'm hoping and I'm knowing and I'm trusting that it is going to be for my betterment in the long run. So anyways, all tying this back to the exam, your exam results, this exam or any exam does not define your worth or your value as an OncoPT. And I know we've talked about this, but let's kind of sit with it a little bit longer. What the exam is looking at is your knowledge and your ability to apply your knowledge and your experience to a case patient And it's really a snapshot in time. Like it is a one-time look at how are you on this day, again, whatever that is. I took my exam on a Saturday, I think. How are you doing cognitively on this Saturday or whatever day you took the exam to take your knowledge and your experience and try to marry it to this hypothetical patient case that we, the people behind ABPTS and all the amazing test question writers are coming up with. It assesses your knowledge and your skill set under a very, very particular set of circumstances, under a very specific set of conditions. But it also does not encompass your entire, abilities, like the entirety of your abilities or even your potential as an oncology physical therapist. Your worth cannot possibly be demonstrated in that 7-hour time period where you're sitting in front of a computer trying not to, run out of time as you're answering these questions. Your capabilities, your abilities are reflected in the countless hours that you spend with your patients, with the compassion you show, again, with the positive impacts that you're making in your lives. An exam cannot possibly capture all of the things that you put into being a physical therapist, right? Your daily commitment to showing up every day and working with your oncology patients, how much growth you've had as a professional, not just in the time leading up to the exam, but I would wager to say, because I talk to y'all and I hear a lot of y'all talking about this, the growth you have seen in yourself since the exam. Do you ever stop to think about that? How much have you grown in your decision making, in your knowledge, in your expertise since the exam? Just a few months ago, I would wager quite a bit because I see you, I hear you, I know the good work that you're doing out in the community. And an exam also does not capture your resilience and your perseverance. Facing challenges and setbacks. And maybe the exam is one of them for you, right? Maybe it's a patient interaction that you're encountering, you're working with right now in your clinical care. Facing these challenges and setbacks are part of professional journey and ultimately professional growth. And how you handle these moments and continue to move forward even when there are these challenges is a true testament to your strength and your dedication to becoming the best OncoPT possible. Your dedication to the field of oncology physical therapy, to the field of cancer rehab is what truly matters. And so I really want you to sit with, instead of, if and when you get your exam results, and maybe they're not how you wanted them to pan out, right? I want you to sit with these 4 things and really think about how these are reflected in your own journey as an OncoPT and in your daily patient care. So number 1, your long-term commitment to patient care. That is not like you being a good OncoPT is not something that you can turn off or that you're going to turn off after you get your exam results back, right? You are going to continue being an amazing physical therapist for your patient. And I hate to say it, I go back and forth on this, to be frank, and I see it both ways. I think being a board certified specialist can be a good thing if you are in an area where that is understood and recognized by your community. And that could be fellow healthcare professionals, but that could also be the greater public, right? If you are in an area where that is something that people are like, oh, I recognize that, I understand what that means, and I want that for me, great, amazing. That can open a ton of doors. Now, you may not be in an area where that is necessarily like something that is very top of mind or that's understood or that's appreciated. And that's not to say that your patients and your community don't appreciate it. They may just not understand what that means, because board certified PT isn't something that a lot of the general public really experience and understand that difference necessarily. Some do, but I've found that I live in an area that doesn't necessarily have a whole lot of board certified specialists. And so that's not something that is necessarily being sought out by either patients or healthcare professionals. But you know what they are looking at? They are looking at how committed are you to showing up every day and providing excellent care for your patients, right? So yes, board certification is cool, amazing, can open a lot of doors. I think Scott Capozza speaks about this a lot and is a great example of this. But know that that is not the only way to demonstrate to your patients, your community, that you are really committed to providing the best care possible. Another demonstration of your dedication would be the advocacy and support that you are providing to not only your patients, but also their families, their caregivers, right? That's not something you're going to flip off once you get your exam results back. You are going to continue showing up and advocating and supporting your patients in their community, because that's how you're going to be the best OncoPT possible, right? You are not going to stop improving constantly, right? We are always going to, it feels like we're always going to do continuing education courses, sitting in on webinars, reading different articles, learning the best available evidence to inform our practice so that we can better show up more effectively, more efficiently for our patients, every single day that we go in and see them. And then the fourth kind of column here of your dedication would be the collaboration with colleagues. So as part of becoming a specialist or preparing to become a specialist, you're not in a silo, right? You shouldn't be in a silo. You should be leaning on and networking and connecting with other OncoPTs and cancer rehab professionals in our space, because again, when your patients get better, all of our patients get better. And what I mean by this is when we share what we've learned, what's working and what's not working in our practice with fellow cancer rehab professionals, they're able to implement that into their own practice. They're able to then share that back with you and say, you know what, this did not work, but this did. I found this for my patient. That's probably one of my favorite things about OncoPT, side note, is how willing most OncoPTs are to share what they've learned has not worked, so that you're ultimately able to get to that point, whatever that is, to achieve that goal with your patient faster, right? More effectively, more efficiently. Now, all of this is really easy for me to say, and I'm aware of that because I am not necessarily in the situation like I did that 4 years ago, 4 years ago, where I took my exam, got my results. I remember those moments. But I also wanted to pull someone else from our community who so wonderfully shared her own experience with going through the Oncology Specialty Certification process. So from submitting her application, writing an amazing case report, preparing for the exam, and ultimately getting her exam results back and not passing. So this is Melissa White. You may recognize her from an episode we did a couple months ago. And I really want you to listen to what she says here, because first of all, I'm not going to try and say her own words because she said them so beautifully, but really listen in to what Melissa is saying and her experience and ultimately how this has transformed her clinical practice, because that for me was probably the most exciting thing and surprising thing when I heard it at first. So anyways, I'm going to shut my mouth and put Melissa on here, and then we'll come back and discuss afterwards.
I don't know. I guess I will share too. We had kind of talked about this earlier that, yes, I studied my rear end off for this test, and I unfortunately did not end up passing the test. And I was sharing with Elise that, I did everything that I could. I studied, I bought the books. But I am, as I kind of analyzed everything, I feel like it was just my practice wasn't set up to, I guess, promote using all the things that I had learned. I'm a full-time pelvic floor therapist. And so even the oncology population that I am immersed with, I'm not constantly looking at lab values. I'm not working on strengthening and peripheral neuropathy and all of those things. So, and I don't treat lymphedema. I'm not a lymphedema therapist. So I think all of those things, hindered me. It was an amazing process. I learned so much. I have a ton of resources, but, and like I said, I'm so glad that I went through it. Again, just trying to teach my kids lessons, and, you work hard for things, you do your best, and you don't always come out on top. You don't always win. I shared this with you, Elise, that my son said to me, well, a lot of people wouldn't have even tried, and so I feel like just in our household, that was a huge lesson for my kids to see that, hey, mommy did something really, really hard, and, I didn't pass, but like I said, I still feel like, I learned so much, and it wasn't all for nothing. Like, I have the experience, I have the knowledge. Like I said, I have the resources, that if I do need those things, that I will go back and look at them again. So just for everyone out there, so.
Thank you so much for sharing that too, Melissa, because and this is something you had mentioned to me off air, and I want to make sure that we really touch on it here. This is not something that people talk about.
Right.
Like, I don't know that I personally, because you and I have talked about it, and I've talked with a couple others, like, I know there are some people out there who have taken the exam and did not ultimately pass when they took it the first time. And that's still a really valid's not the right word I'm looking for. Like, obviously that's your experience, but I think one of the things that gets lost sometimes in the oncology specialty, and even, like, I'm sure the others, right? But I'm not in wound care, so I can't comment on that. But the process of specialization, like I believe the writing of the case report and the studying for the exam is what makes you the expert clinician, where it really solidifies that expertise that you have. Because again, I'm going to put you on the spot. I've been asking you questions that I did not prep you for. How do you feel like your practice, your clinical care for oncology patients changed over the studying process? I know I asked you about the case report. What about kind of this end of things?
Well, just, and this is something now that I'm back in the Cancer Institute, I want to refresh up on again, but just, I think the huge thing was just the treatments that patients are on, like the side effects, like, being able to prepare them and just being able to know, oh, when they're on this drug, they're going to experience this. When they're on this, just helping them understand what it might lead to, what they might experience. Because a lot of patients, they don't know, they're just like, oh, I have to take this drug. And whether they were told or not, they only absorb so much. So,
right.
Being able to help them with, okay, well, let's make sure that, you watch your balance. And that if you're starting to notice anything, ask the doctor to come back, give you an order for rehab. That's one thing that I would love to do, is like the perspective surveillance model. Yeah. I would love to incorporate that more with all of our rehab. Like, okay, you're on this protocol. This is going to cause you fatigue and peripheral neuropathy. Let's start screening for that, so that once you start experiencing that, we can start treating it. Like, that's something that I would love to do. And just knowing that that's a thing, and to help, like, that's the part that has really helped me, is just the side effects of the treatments, of the chemos specifically, because I didn't know what they were before. I mean, I was reading them all the time, but I'm like, I don't know what this is going to do, where it's going to go, what's going to happen. And so that was huge for me.
That's amazing. And again, I really like the W's in the background of your house. I mean,
my last name's White.
Wonderful family photos, but like, we could do hard things. It's just, I feel like that's been peeking at me from behind the screen of like, we can do hard things. And this is a really good example of like, you did a really, really hard thing. First of all, let's pause. You did two really hard things, because you wrote and submitted a case report, and then you studied your butt off for this exam, which is so amazing. And ultimately, your patients are the ones who are benefiting the most out of this experience.
Absolutely.
Because you are showing up fully armored with this knowledge of like, I know what to expect. And that's what I really love. We were talking about this a little more off air, more than in the actual interview, but just how much education you're doing on, hey, patient, here's what you can expect from this kinds of treatment. Because like you said, they are already trying to absorb so much information. I know we talk about in PT school, trying to drink out of a fire hydrant. I feel like when you're diagnosed with cancer, the fire hydrant is only part of it. It's like trying to drink out of a hurricane, like just with the amount of load and force and insanity that's happening around you. And if you're one more voice who is just reinforcing and restating some of that information they probably got somewhere, hopefully got somewhere, but you and I also know sometimes they don't get that information.
Absolutely.
Just being that constant, dependable source of where they can get that information, man, that is amazing and so transformative in their experience to ultimately, hopefully get some of that quality of life back. And I know we were talking about that a little more off air too of, yeah, treatment cured you, but what kind of a life are you left with? So
100%. That's my thing. I want to help them get as functional as they can in all ways,
I love that.
So education is, I think, my favorite thing to do. I always tell patients I love to run my mouth because I want them to get it. I mean, even in the pelvic floor, that is an area that patients have no idea what they're there for, that they even have a pelvic floor, that there's even treatment for these things. And so I always feel like on my first visit with them, when I'm doing the eval, that I'm buying them. Like I have to hook them. I have to give them the reason why they're coming back, why they need to see me. And that's education that, oh my God, this girl knows what she's talking about. Like, oh, she might actually be able to help me. That's, she makes sense. Yeah. So that's what I go on, is just trying to help the patient understand. So.
Oh my gosh. Melissa, thank you so much for sharing all of that, first of all. Yes. And again, I really appreciate you being honest and vulnerable today talking about this, because this is not something that people talk about. I think we like to put on this gloss of like, everything's fine and we have everything figured out. And sometimes we don't. And sometimes we need help. And it's okay. And that's why we're here as a community, to help each other out. So thank you so much for that. Anything else that you'd like to leave our listeners with today before we wrap up today's interview?
I don't think so. Like I said, I just feel like your whole program was a blessing to me. Like I said, I can't remember how I stumbled upon it, but just learning from your podcast and just, the help and just the resources. And again, you'd be silly not to sign up for the program. And then for your boot camp too, I will put a plug in for that too. That was amazing. So helpful. It was, I think you have one a week or something, a podcast where you're educating, and just, you can do that at your own pace. Like I was trying to get information from all these different places. And, it was just so nice to be able to do it at home at my own pace. And so you did such a great job at just pouring in the education that we need. And so, yes, like I said, I'm just so grateful that I stumbled upon you.
Like I said previously, I could not have said Melissa's words any better than what she said them. And if you want to go back and listen to her episode, I've also linked those in the show notes. Fabulous episode. Highly encourage it, from a couple months ago. Those will be linked in the show notes. Again, you can find those at the oncopt.com/305. And all of that information will be there, as well as everything that we've covered so far in the episode. So now what? Let's say that you get your exam results and they're not what you want to be. You end up not passing the exam. Here are some practical steps that I would encourage you to take moving forward. So first and foremost, I think, like, before we even get into like the other steps here, we need to acknowledge not passing the exam is not uncommon. Not passing the exam on your first try is not uncommon. This is actually more common than we think. And unfortunately, people don't really talk about this. And that's why I really wanted to bring Melissa back on here, because this isn't something that we talk about. Unfortunately, I think there is very misguidedly a lot of shame around that process. And I don't want there to be shame around this process because this is really, really challenging. This is very difficult. And if you're not 100% on the money with everything that you do and you study exactly the things that they're looking for, but they don't tell you that you really need to be looking for, like it's a very, very challenging process. And so I don't want you to just beat yourself into a hole so deep that you can't pull yourself out of. Okay. So first and foremost, let's normalize not passing on your first try is not uncommon. It is way more common than you think. We just don't talk about it. Okay. So now that we've got that out of the way, first official tip, except for that one, is to take time to process. Do not, please hear me out. Do not immediately jump back into study mode, okay? First of all, that is not a requirement. If you choose to sit for next year's exam, if you want to retry, you don't have to make that decision right away, okay? You do not. If I remember correctly, you actually have a couple months, maybe like in September, before you have to make that decision. Don't quote me on that. I don't have those dates in front of me, but you don't have to make that decision right away. And you shouldn't, because there is a lot that's going through your head, there is a lot that is going through your heart right now. And so you need time, like a few days at minimum, to really process your emotions. It is okay. It is normal. It is acceptable. It is, in fact, something you should do. You should take the time to feel disappointed and frustrated and sad and angry and any other emotion. Your emotional response to this is valid, okay? This is valid. These feelings are natural and they are valid and they are acceptable and they are a very understandable, logical response to receiving this disappointing news. And so I don't want you to rush through that process. Take the time to really process your emotions, whatever that looks like for you. Maybe that's talking it over with friends and family. Maybe that's talking it over with, if you have a therapist you really enjoy, awesome. That would be a great person to start with. Journal, again, any number of things to help you process those emotions. Take the time to give yourself a little space and to just sit with the sad. And that is okay. If and when you feel ready, review your results. Now, again, this is maybe not something I would recommend you dive super deep into immediately after getting your results. I would, again, wait a few days, process, kind of get through the immediate suck of it all, and then go back. And they should identify different areas, like in your score report, where you struggled, where you need more work. This is going to be really important for when you get back into the preparation process, which I would suggest, again, fall, okay? Give yourself the summer, enjoy your summer. But then when we get back into the fall, when you start getting back into studying, that's when I would really bring out that score report and where those areas were that you struggled, so that you can better inform and structure your study plan moving forward. Set new goals for yourself. So at this point, again, this is where I would say in the fall, at some point, create a realistic and achievable study plan. Break down the material, especially the areas where you struggled, into manageable chunks, manageable sections, and then set very specific goals for each study session that you schedule for yourself. When you do this, you should be using a variety of study materials. Do not only study from one textbook, for example. That is a bad idea. Don't do this. You need multiple resources, multiple sources, because again, even the best textbook, even the best oncology rehab textbook, I freaking love the relatively new oncology rehab textbook by, oh my God, of course I'm going to forget the names, Doherty, Bowright, Wilson, that came out just a couple years ago. But there is also new information that's come out since that amazing textbook was published. Still a great resource. Okay, it's going to be a good resource for a while, but they don't have the articles from 2024 and beyond on there, okay? And this goes for any resource, right? Don't just rely on one resource, one set of resources to prepare for your exam. You need to have multiple ways, multiple methods, multiple perspectives to inform you so that you can get a very holistic, big picture view of the material that you need to understand for this. Maybe this looks like taking practice exams, whether you make those for yourself or you get them from somewhere else. Side note, I also have those if you want them. Let me know. I'm happy to share those. Get into study groups. Maybe you're taking some kind of like course, but any number of these, we need to change up and add to how you're studying to make sure that you have a very well-rounded, holistic approach to studying this material. And then also seek feedback. This could be a great opportunity for you to get information and feedback from like mentors or colleagues who have passed the exam, and they may be able to provide valuable insights into how they prepared, what worked for them, and even what didn't work for them, and what they know, has not been a strategy that has served people well as they prepare for this, okay? So lots of different ways here, but these are just a few actionable tips that I would really encourage you to lean into. So by applying and following these practical steps and then seeking support along the way, you can turn this challenge into an opportunity for growth and development for you. Because I really want you, I'm going to come back to this again and again, your journey in oncology physical therapy is a marathon, nay, an ultra marathon. Picture whatever the worst, like what is the worst event that you could do that's the longest and most arduous? I don't know, like the ultra Ironman where you're swimming through a volcano or something. Like this is what we're talking about here. OncoPT is not a sprint. It is an ultra marathon through lava, okay, through a volcano. And every single step that you take, including the steps back that you take, including the setbacks, contribute to your overall progress and success. Period. Like done, hands down. So as we wrap up today's episode, it's really, really important that you remember this exam or any other exam does not define your worth or capabilities as an OncoPT. Your dedication to showing up for your patients day after day, your commitment to continuously learning and improving, and the compassion that you show every day are what truly matter. Full stop. That's it. That's all. Like, if you stop the episode here, we're good to go. But we're going to cover just a couple more things before we sign off for today. Handling disappointment, rejection, setbacks, anything negative, okay? With self-compassion, aka compassion for yourself, grace with yourself, staying positive, right? Having a plan forward, planning your next steps carefully are all crucial strategies for moving forward. And the qualities that make you a great OncoPT, your empathy, your knowledge, your patient care, your continuous learning, and your resilience are far more significant than any test score that you could possibly get. Remember that OncoPT is a marathon, ultramarathon through lava, or whatever crazy race you can think of here, not a sprint. And every step that you take, whether forward or backward, are all towards your eventual growth and success, right? The path to success, the path to growth is not a straight line. It is often very windy, backtracking a little bit, then crossing over and maybe going up a couple hills, etc. This is all part of it, okay? Now, I would really encourage you that whether you are in this boat of you took the test, didn't pass, or you are preparing at some point to take the test, I would really encourage you to join our OncoPT. So it's the OncoPT specialization community. This is our free online community that is built entirely around helping you specialize as an OncoPT. You can join for free at the oncopt.com/specialization. Wow. Let me try that again. The oncopt.com/specialization. And this is for when you need support, you need to share your experiences, you need to lean on colleagues and get the motivation, encouragement from other therapists who are in the same boat as you or have maybe are on the other side of this journey, who are the specialists and are now, sharing what they have learned with others. This is where it's happening. We are all in this together, and there is a wealth of knowledge and encouragement available with this community. Again, you can join for free at the oncopt.com/specialization. Thank you so much for your dedication to the field of OncoPT and for listening to today's episode. You've put in a tremendous amount of work to get to this point. No matter what happens, no matter what you see when you open up that score report, your commitment to improving the lives of patients every day, no matter how hard it gets, no matter how frustrating it can be to show up sometimes, you are making a positive impact. Keep up the incredible work and know that your value is far beyond what any exam result may be. Until next time, this is Elise with the OncoPT. And remember, you are exactly the physical therapist that your patients with cancer need. So let's get to work.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the OncoPT podcast. If you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, leave a rating and review, or support us on Patreon.